Hi, Film Loom here. Today I'm going to explain a war/horror movie called Come and See. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie opens in 1943 in some rural village of Belarusia, where an elderly man is shouting angrily. The film opens in 1943 in a rural Belarusian village. An elderly man frantically warns local children to stay indoors, but a teenager named Florya and his friend disregard him and continue digging in a sandy field. This area was recently a battlefield between Soviet and Nazi forces, with the Nazis emerging victorious. The boys aspire to join the Soviet partisans, a local militia, and believe finding a weapon is their ticket in. They understand the danger. Discovery by the occupying Germans would have severe repercussions. They hide at every sound, continuing their search until Florya unearths an SVT-40 rifle in a sandmine trench. Overjoyed, they celebrate their find, but a German reconnaissance aircraft flies overhead, spotting their activity. The following morning, Florya's mother learns of his intention to join the resistance. Knowing the dire consequences for their family if the Germans discover this, she hands Florya an axe, pleading with him to kill her and his two younger sisters. Florya remains silent, instead trying to cheer up his sisters with playful faces. Soon after, two partisans arrive at their hut dressed in German uniforms. They are there to conscript Florya, who is ecstatic. He eagerly grabs the rifle and his belongings, standing at attention like a soldier. His mother's demeanor changes, becoming more welcoming to the men, though she is visibly heartbroken at the prospect of her only son leaving for war. The scene highlights the desperation of the situation, where even disguises and deception are necessary for the resistance to operate, and the agonizing choice families face in sending their loved ones to fight. The partisans' use of German uniforms serves a dual purpose: to conscript new recruits without endangering their families. The staged arrest of Florya is an act designed to deceive any onlookers into believing he is being taken by the Nazis. The performance is convincing. The partisans even throw Florya to the ground, resulting in a cut on his forehead. His mother understands the ruse and plays her part, further solidifying the deception. Florya is then placed in a wagon, and the partisans leave the village, the young boy casting one last look at his family. Florya arrives at the Soviet resistance camp, home to several hundred soldiers. He is excited to be a part of the militia, eagerly performing any task assigned to him. He observes other recruits embracing their role, some even riding on tanks. He is soon included in a photo opportunity designed to showcase their united front against the German invasion. As dusk falls, the partisan commander, Cossack, asks Florya to introduce himself and instructs him on his first duty, guarding the camp. Florya is told to shoot anyone who fails to stop and provide the password upon entering. He fails his first test when a young girl named Glasha approaches the camp, following Cossack. Florya attempts to ask her for the password, but she ignores him and walks past. Later that night, two experienced guards replace Florya on patrol. The following day, Florya is tasked with washing a large steel basin used for boiling water. He watches other young men interacting with Glasha, the girl from the previous night, and feels a pang of jealousy. Soon after, Cossack gathers the partisans for a meeting. He emphasizes the dangers of fighting against Hitler's forces and stresses the importance of defending their territory. After his briefing, Cossack asks if anyone is unable to march. One man steps forward, citing the poor condition of his boots. In a surprising move, Cossack orders him to exchange boots with Florya. Though reluctant, Florya complies. He yearns to participate in the action, but the boot swap means he will remain at the camp. As the resistance army marches off, Florya is left behind, tasked with guarding the now empty camp. While wandering around, he hears someone crying. He follows the sound and finds Glasha, the same young woman from the previous night. Overcome with emotion, Florya sits beside her and begins to cry as well, sharing in her unspoken grief and fear. After sharing their frustrations, Florya and Glasha begin to laugh and connect. Glasha playfully suggests Florya was left behind because he seemed too weak for combat. Their conversation is interrupted by the sudden appearance of German paratroopers descending from the sky, followed by dive bombers that unleash a devastating attack on the resistance camp. The shelling creates unprecedented chaos, leaving Florya deafened. He searches for Glasha but instead sees a German soldier caught in the trees, paralyzing him with fear. Glasha pulls him back to reality, and they flee into the forest. Moments later, German paratroopers begin firing in their direction, forcing them to hide in a trench. With nowhere else to go, Florya gathers wood and vegetation to build a makeshift shelter. They huddle together for warmth and fall asleep. Several hours later, they journey towards Florya's village, hoping for food and reunion with his family. However, the village is deserted and unsettlingly quiet. Florya notices smoke rising from his house's chimney, assuming his family recently left. He retrieves a warm soup from the fireplace and offers it to Glasha. She notices an unusual number of flies on the table and several dolls scattered nearby. This realization dawns on Florya: his family isn't simply gone, they are likely hiding somewhere the Germans wouldn't search. He rushes out of the house toward the dense forest behind it, with Glasha following. As she trails behind him, Glasha is confronted with a horrifying sight: a pile of lifeless, partially clothed bodies. Though terrified, she understands the implications of this gruesome discovery and continues to follow Florya, knowing they must find out what happened to his family. Glasha, witnessing the horrifying scene of the bodies, chooses not to tell Florya, knowing the devastating impact it would have. Oblivious, Florya attempts to cross a bog to reach the forest. Glasha follows, and they nearly drown in the muddy water. She tries to reason with him, but he refuses to listen, forcing her to reveal the truth about the bodies she saw. The shocking revelation causes Florya to momentarily lose control. He chokes Glasha and pushes her back into the bog. He instantly regrets his actions and pulls her to safety. A partisan fighter named Rubas arrives and rescues Glasha from the bog. Furious, she accuses Florya of trying to kill her, believing he has lost his mind. Rubas intervenes, calming the situation and leading them to a large group of villagers who have fled the Germans. Among them is the old village elder who had previously warned Florya and his friend about the invasion. The elder reveals he witnessed Florya's family's execution and expresses regret that the boys ever dug up the rifles. The weight of this truth crashes down on Florya. He understands his actions led to his family's death. Overwhelmed by guilt, he tries to take his own life by burying his head in the mud. Glasha and the villagers stop him and provide him with food and comfort as he grapples with the devastating reality. Rubas then shaves off some of Florya's hair and buries it as a symbolic act of survival and moving forward. The other refugees create a scarecrow effigy of Hitler, spitting on it in defiance. Rubas leads a group of able-bodied men, including Florya, on a supply run. They locate food at a nearby warehouse but discover it is guarded by German troops. The Germans open fire, forcing the Soviets to retreat into the dense forest, where they spend the night. The following day, they place the Hitler scarecrow at a crossroads as a gesture of mockery towards the invaders. The group continues to wander, eventually stopping near a minefield. Russian flyers scattered on the ground indicate that friendly troops were recently present. As sunset approaches, the group decides to risk crossing a dirt road riddled with landmines. Two of the men inadvertently trigger a landmine, resulting in their deaths. This forces Rubas and Florya to continue their journey alone, eventually reaching an occupied village under the cover of night. They steal a cow from a farmer and immediately begin milking it, their brief moment of success shattered by sudden German gunfire from all directions. Florya takes cover, but Rubas is instantly killed. Desperate, Florya crawls to retrieve the cow, only to witness it also being gunned down. He breaks down in tears, eventually falling asleep beside the dead animal. He awakens the next morning to dense fog. Attempting to cut meat from the cow, he finds his knife inadequate and is forced to abandon it. Soon after, he encounters a horse cart and tries to steal it, but the owner stops him. A heated argument ensues, interrupted by the arrival of a German truck. The old man quickly changes his demeanor and hides Florya under hay, instructing him to pose as his grandson. Arriving at the man's home, Florya is introduced to the rest of the family. The introductions are cut short by the intrusion of German soldiers who seat themselves at the table. Some family members nervously serve them food, while others remain silent, gripped by fear. The soldiers then order everyone outside for a routine inspection. Florya, sensing danger, tries to warn the others of their impending doom, but his warnings are ignored. The men are separated and marched away in groups, while the women and children are lined up to show their papers, naively believing they will be transported to safety in Germany. As a symbol of their control, an injured farmer is forced to hold a sign proclaiming Hitler as the village's liberator. Everyone, including Florya, is then confined within a wooden church. Panic escalates as they desperately seek an escape. A German official announces that anyone wishing to leave can climb through a window, but they must abandon their children. The majority refuse, declaring they would rather die than leave their children. Florya, being alone, manages to escape through the window, but he is immediately captured by an officer. He is thrown to the ground and forced to witness the horrific events about to unfold. The soldiers cruelly throw the baby back into the church and drag the mother away by her hair. Her desperate screams for her child are met with mocking laughter from the Nazis. They then focus their brutality on a Jewish man, whom they torture and kill. This is followed by a barrage of grenades and Molotov cocktails thrown into the church, engulfing it in flames. The screams of the burning people fill the air as Florya watches in utter horror. Unsatisfied with the carnage, the Nazis use flamethrowers and machine guns to ensure no one survives. In the aftermath of this massacre, a German officer points his gun at Florya's head, but instead of shooting, they force him into a photograph, using him as a macabre prop in their cruel joke. The Nazis then force the captured woman into their truck, where they brutally assault her. In a final act of inhumanity, they carry a sick, elderly woman from her bed and leave her outside to die. Some time later, Florya wanders away from the devastated village, moving in the direction the Germans had gone. He finds they have been ambushed by the Soviet partisans. He retrieves bandages from a German officer's bag and finds his own jacket and rifle in the hayfield. He eventually rejoins his fellow partisans, led by Cossack, who have captured 11 Germans, including the commander responsible for the village massacre and his collaborators. Some of the captured men beg for their lives, trying to shift the blame, but a young, fanatical Nazi remains defiant, vowing that they will continue their genocidal mission regardless of the consequences. Cossack orders one of the collaborators to pour gasoline over the captured Germans. The man complies, drenching his former comrades. Before they can be burned alive, the partisans execute them. The crowd erupts in cheers at this act of retribution, but Florya remains deeply traumatized by the horrors he has witnessed. As the others disperse, Florya notices a framed portrait of Adolf Hitler lying in a puddle. Consumed by rage, he shoots at it repeatedly. He then experiences a surreal vision. Hitler's life plays out in reverse, from his role as a genocidal dictator back to his beginnings as a failed artist, his time as a soldier, his rise in the political landscape, and finally, to his infancy.